Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. We've got a lot on deck today. We're going to have a delayed look at the past weekend at the box office, and we're also going to look at 2025, what the overall box office performance was, some of the biggest hits of the year, some of the biggest misses of the year. There's lots to get to, but before we get to that, I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about this past week. As you may have noticed, I have not had anything on the channel. This episode is a few days later than it usually is. And I just wanted to address that a bit. In my last episode, which was my review of the Stranger Things series finale, I referenced that I was with my family during a family emergency, and that was regarding my Uncle Thomas. My mom had two brothers, and they were both great uncles, fantastic uncles. My Uncle Thomas lived down in Galveston, Texas, and we got word on Sunday, the 28th, I believe, of December, that he had been in a bicycle accident down in Galveston. My mom at the time was helping to take care of my great aunt in South Carolina, which is where I went that next day. That's where I did the best of 2025 video, if you saw that one. I was there for a couple days, and then I went and joined my mom in Galveston, which is where I did the Stranger Things finale video. And unfortunately, the bicycle accident, there was no other car involved. It was just kind of a freak series of circumstances. The accident resulted in a severe spinal cord injury for my uncle, and it caused damage that unfortunately he was not able to recover from. So there were a few days of tests and getting that diagnosis. And then I was with my mom, who stayed with him in the hospital the entire time for the next few days as we went through the organ donation process. My uncle was an organ donor, and we got word within 24 hours of when he passed away, which was on Monday, that three of his organs had already been transplanted. And, this has been a very difficult time for my family, but it has sort of helped to lighten the load a little bit to know that while we're going through this tragedy, there were at least three other families that were going through a moment of great happiness for them. I don't know if you're an organ donor or what your stance on that is, but I am an organ donor myself, and it really did kind of have it was a bit of a ray of light in the middle of this terrible situation. Just to talk about my uncle a little bit, like I said, he was such an amazing uncle. I had two, my Uncle Charlie, who you have heard me talk about on this channel so many times, who I would go to the movies with and all of that, and who passed away several years ago. And then my Uncle Thomas, who was an absolute wild card. He was known as the rebel in the family when I was growing up in the 90s, mainly just because he had long hair and an earring, which for a Southern family in the 90s was like the ultimate rebel move. But the way that I described him also is just a wild card. I mean, at least once in every conversation, he would say something that would just make you laugh and shake your head because there's no other response that you could have. And when I was growing up, he would always, when we were both at my grandmother's house, when we'd both be visiting, he would always make sure when I was a kid that when I got up to watch Pee-wee's Playhouse on Saturday mornings, that I would go wake him up so he could watch Pee-wee's Playhouse with me because he loved it just as much as I did. And then when I was really young, I was so interested in this show he kept talking about that was his favorite show that he would watch every single week, and that show was The Simpsons. And so from pretty much the time that it came on until the time I was allowed to watch it, which was several years later, I was always curious about this show that my uncle loved called The Simpsons. And I'm sure that I probably started watching it because he talked about how much he loved it. And so he was kind of my introduction to that 80s, 90s kind of youth-focused, almost counterculture kind of thing. Those comedy shows that were just as entertaining for adults as they were for kids. And he was such an influence on me in that way, and also just because he was a very loving man and such a key part of our family. Our family's not very big, and and he was such a just he would laugh so many times when he would come to visit, and we're so lucky that this past Thanksgiving we got the whole family together. Like I said, there's not many of us for the first time in years to do a family Thanksgiving, and almost everybody was there. And it was so great to spend that time with him. Of course, we didn't know at the time that that would be the last time that we got to spend with him. But that was such a gift. And, it's a terrible situation. I'll actually be going back to Texas this weekend with my mom to help settle some of his affairs. So you're going to be seeing a little bit more from me on the road with the Golden Globes and probably next week's charts and stuff like that. But very briefly, I just wanted to thank, first of all, he had a medical care staff at the Jenny Seeley Hospital at UTMB Health in Galveston, Texas. I've had, unfortunately, relatives that have been in the hospital for extended periods of time before, and they all received good care, but the staff there, top to bottom, was absolutely exceptional, compassionate, just worked with us throughout this entire process, and it was not an easy process. And every single person that we met, from the people at the front desk to all of his medical team, were fantastic. And also, my uncle, for 43 years, worked for Southwest Airlines. He loved Southwest Airlines. He had such pride in that company. And the people that he worked with reached out as soon as they heard and offered their help and support. They flew me from South Carolina to Houston. They flew me and my mom back from Houston to Little Rock earlier this week. And the care and compassion and love that they have shown our family has been incredible. It's a tough situation. It's really difficult, and nothing puts the finale of a Netflix streaming show in perspective more than trying to talk about it while also going through this. And I know some people would say, well, why would you even do it? But that video and getting it out is what allowed me really to feel like I could just take the rest of this past week and not even have to think about the channel. No offense, but as many of you have said, and I appreciate your understanding as well, family does come first. So, it has helped kind of put things in perspective for me a little bit. It's been tough. It's going to be tough still. But I wanted to kind of end this, and then we'll get into the box office and everything else, with a video that recently I've been archiving all of our family home movies. And I found this. This was shot in probably 1994 at my grandmother's house. And it was a great example of just how loving my uncle was growing up and how much fun he was. And as a bonus, you also get to see my Uncle Charlie in this video, and you can kind of see the dynamic. For reference here, I am the pudgy kid in the yellow polo shirt. And what we're talking about is a Star Trek The Next Generation VHS board game that I had played with my mom and my uncle the previous day, where I had a chance to leave the Enterprise on a shuttle as a player, and I did, and then the Klingon commander, I think it was, I don't even know, Galron maybe, blew up the Enterprise after I left. And so this is a clip of my Uncle Thomas giving me a little bit of grief for that when I was a kid.
And you know what? He chickened out.
He just said there's a shuttle leaving the Enterprise. One person could leave. And
He
I said,
left me into there by ourselves.
well, you got killed. You got blown up. At least I was safe in the shuttlecraft. At least I was safe in the shuttlecraft.
You little thief! You left us. You left us out of the starship. Go.
I know, but at least I was safe in the shuttlecraft, feeling remorse while you were blown up to bits.
Feeling remorse?
Yes. I'll go get the fire, the FIRE.
Walking in the back of a pig. Yes, I was feeling remorse as I was traversing across the lawn area.
So let's move on now to the box office and the 2025 year in review, and I appreciate you indulging me there, as I got to remember my uncle, as I will be for quite some time, as will everybody who knew him. These numbers obviously are a bit delayed, but we're going to go back and look at the box office for the past weekend. So this would be January 2nd through the 4th. So the first weekend of 2026. And the number one movie was Avatar: Fire and Ash in its third weekend with those James Cameron legs. It dropped 34.3% for a $41.4 million third weekend. It's now over $300 million domestic. These totals are a little out of date because I compiled this a couple days ago. Zootopia 2, in its sixth week, look at that drop. 2.5% drop from the previous week, which was the Christmas holiday week. It made another $19.3 million. It's now at $364 million domestically. The Housemaid also basically flat from the week before. It dropped 1.4% for a $15.1 million weekend and a $75.9 million total. Marty Supreme dropped 20.5% for $12.5 million. It's now over $50 million domestic. Anaconda dropped 31%, bringing in just over $10 million. It's now at $45.8 million. In sixth place was the SpongeBob movie Search for SquarePants, which dropped 25.2%, brought in another $8.3 million. David comes in seventh place at 38.7% for a $7.6 million weekend. Song Sung Blue dropped 17% and brought in $5.8 million. It's at $25 million. It hasn't done amazingly well at the box office, but Kate Hudson just scored, I think, a surprise nomination at the SAG Awards, so we'll see if interest builds in that movie over time. Wicked for Good sticks around for another week for the 38.7% drop. And Five Nights at Freddy's 2 stuck around for another week at 39% drop for a $125.2 million total. One of the rare weekends where the top 10 from the previous weekend was exactly the same, and that's mainly because these were carryover releases from that Christmas window. Let's take a look at a couple of these movies specifically, and we'll start with Avatar: Fire and Ash. Right now on James Cameron's inflation-adjusted chart, it is at number 6, so it's moved ahead of Aliens, The Abyss, and The Terminator, and it may now be or will soon be ahead of True Lies to hit that number 5 spot, but then it's got a pretty big climb to get up to Terminator 2 Judgment Day at $487.4 million. And this is how Avatar: Fire and Ash, which is in orange here, is comparing against Avatar: The Way of Water. I talked about the fact last week, due to a bit of a difference in their release schedules as far as the date that each movie was released, we hadn't really seen what the Christmas legs did to Avatar 2 versus Avatar 3, but we can see it on this chart, and you can see that it is a pretty substantial gap between the two films. So Avatar: The Way of Water kind of taking off versus Fire and Ash. But again, as I mentioned on the last show that I did, that doesn't mean that Fire and Ash is a flop. It's not a flop. It's at over $1 billion. It is just not as much of a success as the previous Avatar films, and that's something that James Cameron and Disney are just going to have to look at. Zootopia 2 is now one of the 5 highest-grossing films released from Disney Animation, and again, this is not Pixar. These are movies that are branded specifically with the Disney Animation branding. It is now about $35 million behind Frozen. It has moved ahead of the original Zootopia, so if it can break that $400 million mark, it'll hit number 4 on this list, and it's tracking well. I mean, the momentum of this movie has been very good. And let's talk about Marty Supreme a little bit. It is now the 3rd highest grossing film in A24 history. It's behind only Civil War and Everything Everywhere All at Once. Of course, it also had a much bigger budget than most of these movies. But if it can make about $20 million more and it's got a long awards season ahead of it, then it's got a really legitimate shot at becoming the highest grossing film domestically that A24 has ever released, and it certainly has been getting a lot of awards attention. Let's take a look now at the international box office, and this is abridged a little bit from a usual charts episode, just for time purposes and because there's so much to get to. So let's look at all of the countries outside of the US and Canada, again for January 2nd through the 4th. The number 1 movie, no surprise here, was Avatar: Fire and Ash, bringing in another $129.6 million. Zootopia 2 staying pretty much flat internationally as well, with another $62.7 million. The Housemaid making a big jump as it rolls out to countries around the world at $27.4 million in 3rd place. The SpongeBob movie Search for SquarePants, which is also having a bit of a slower rollout, built 3.2% from the previous weekend, so it comes in at $22.8 million. And then the big Italian hit Buen Camino comes in at number 5 at $18.39 million. When you take those international numbers, you combine them with our domestic numbers, we get the top 5 films worldwide. And at number 1, of course, was Avatar: Fire and Ash at $169.6 million. Over $1 billion now at the worldwide box office. Zootopia 2 came in at $81.7 million. It's approaching, or I think is probably by now past, $1.6 billion worldwide. The Housemaid at $42.2 million is now at the $100 million mark worldwide. A nice little sleeper hit for Sydney Sweeney and Amanda Seyfried and Paul Feig there. The SpongeBob movie Search for SquarePants brought in $31 million. It's now at $112.4 million worldwide. And Anaconda brought in $23.4 million worldwide for an $88.3 million global total. This is our 2025 fall holiday box office, and I'll keep updating this chart because it's about movies released after Labor Day in 2025, not necessarily when they made that money. Zootopia 2 has now moved up to number 1 on the chart at $364 million. Wicked for Good moves down to number 2, but Avatar Fire and Ash is gaining quickly. It was only about $32 million behind Wicked for Good when I made this chart. It's even closer now. The Conjuring Last Rites is there at number 4, followed by Demon Slayer Infinity Castle. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is in 6th, with Predator Badlands and Black Phone 2 at number 7 and 8. The Housemaid enters the chart at number 9 at $75.9 million. And Tron Ares moves down to number 10. One Battle After Another drops off of the fall holiday top 10. This is the 2025 domestic box office chart. A Minecraft movie's at number 1, Lilo and Stitch is at number 2, and Zootopia 2 is trying to make a play, perhaps, for that number 1 spot. It needs about another $60 million. It's been doing well, but we now have the bulk of the holiday movie-going season behind us, so those grosses are going to drop. But it moved up 3 spots from the last time we looked at it on this chart. Superman moves down to number 4, with Wicked for Good staying at number 5. Jurassic World Rebirth down 2 spots. Avatar Fire and Ash moving up the chart quickly. It's now the 7th highest grossing domestic release of 2025. Sinners moves down to number 8. The Fantastic Four, First Steps, moves down to number 9. And How to Train Your Dragon moves down to number 10. So this is going to be the 10. These are going to be the 10 highest grossing movies of the year. What we don't know right now is exactly what order they're going to be in. And I think it's going to be pretty close, especially as we get up towards the top. And looking at the 2025 worldwide box office, Nudja 2 and Zootopia 2 are still the 2 highest grossing films of the year. Avatar Fire and Ash is now the 4th movie of the year to cross $1 billion. And as far as Hollywood studios go, Disney is the only studio to generate $1 billion hit. 3 of them actually in 2025 with Zootopia 2, Lilo and Stitch, and Avatar Fire and Ash. A Minecraft movie is down to number 5. Jurassic World Rebirth down to number 6. Demon Slayer is down to number 7. And then we have How to Train Your Dragon, F1 the movie, and Superman rounding out the top 10. And if Superman hangs on, then it will be the only superhero film in the worldwide top 10. And there will be no Marvel movies or MCU films in the top 10. It's been rare in the last, let's say, 15 years to see so few superhero films and no Marvel movies in the top 10 overall. So we have reached the end of 2025, and it's time to do what I usually do, which is to take a look back at the year. It may not be quite as complex as I usually do, but I did still try to crunch the numbers. Let's look first of all at which Hollywood studio ruled the domestic box office as far as market share. And really, December put them over the top. Disney, once again, sold more tickets than any other studio in Hollywood this year. It had 28.7% market share, which means that of all the movie tickets bought in 2025, 28.7% of them, or at least the box office gross for them, went to Disney. Warner Brothers ends up in second place at 21.5%. They had a hot start, but didn't end the year quite as hot as they started it. Universal comes in a close third at 20.6%. Sony comes in at 7%. Paramount, which of course is in the news a lot lately, is now the 5th place studio of 2025 with just 6.4% of the overall domestic gross. Lionsgate comes in at 3.8%. Amazon is such a minuscule amount, they don't even have, there's not room for the text on the chart. And then all other studios, which would be your A24s, etc., sold 10.5% of all tickets in 2025. And there was a lot of talk about 2025 being a big year of recovery at the box office. Maybe it would hit $10 billion domestic. Well, it was a year of recovery, but it was very, very small recovery because when all was said and done, 2025's box office came in at $8.655 billion. That's about $100 million more than we saw in 2024. So 2025, a year hoped for recovery, was basically flat with 2024, up $83.8 million. We were ahead of the pace by $105 million back in November. December did not end up grossing as much this year as it did last year. So I guess the only good news here is that there wasn't a drop in overall cumulative box office, but this was not the year that Hollywood won it. And it had such a strong start with Minecraft and Sinners, but there were some dead spots in the summer. The fall was more or less a disaster. I mean, there were a couple of movies that broke out, and then the holiday season did about as expected. So the industry now turns to 2026 for its hoped for recovery. Of course, there are some massive movies coming out in 2026. So I think that hope isn't unwarranted. But 2025 was not the year that so many people in Hollywood hoped that it was going to be. And we'll see now what the stakes look like in 2026. Although looking at the 2026 versus 2025 weekend box office, and this is what's going to kind of replace the road to recovery, I'm going to look at this year versus last year, week by week. The first weekend of 2026, not much of a graph right now because there's just two dots, was 27.1% ahead of the first weekend of 2025. So we start off ahead of last year, and we'll see what week 2 does. And of course, I will track this week by week throughout the year to see if that recovery does show up and where we're doing better in 2026 or worse than we did in 2025. So let's look at some of the biggest hits of the year, and then we're going to look at some of the biggest misses of the year. And the way I'm going to look at it this year is return on budget. So we have the reported production budget. Which movies worldwide brought back the most on that investment? And we will start with the biggest return on budget for the year 2025. But I think this is a great example of just how not only successful, but lucrative animation from Asia and specifically from Japan and China was in 2025. So these were the movies with the biggest return on budget last year. And the number one movie was actually Chainsaw Man. Now, we've talked about animation budgets in Japan and China and the fact that they're low, possibly because the animators are not as well compensated as they are in the United States and elsewhere. But still, Chainsaw Man ended up bringing 41.55 times its reported budget worldwide. That technically makes it the biggest return on investment in 2025. Demon Slayer Infinity Castle comes in second at almost 40 times its reported budget. And then Nujatu came in at 30.5 times its reported budget. That's nearly 3 times better than the closest Hollywood film. So that just goes to show you how lucrative these movies are becoming for the studios that produce them. Whether or not they are, again, compensating the artist properly, that is another story. But let's look at this chart when we look at just Hollywood films. Right now, Zootopia 2 is leading the way. It currently has brought in 10.62 times its reported budget, and it's still in release. So it looks like this is going to be the Hollywood film with the best return on budget worldwide. Lilo and Stitch is close behind at 10.38 times its budget. Then we have The Conjuring Last Rites, which brought in nearly 9 times its reported budget. Weapons brought in 7 times its reported budget worldwide. A Minecraft movie at 6.39 times its budget. Final Destination Bloodlines at 6.32 times its budget. You can see there, along with The Monkey at 5.79 times its budget, and Five Nights at Freddy's 2, and Black Phone 2, that horror continues to be a very good investment for studios because they can bring it in at a reasonable budget and make many, many times more at the worldwide box office. How to Train Your Dragon comes in at 4.24 times its budget, and Sinners quadrupled its budget at 4.09 times what was reportedly spent to make the film. And so much of what we talk about with a movie's success and whether or not it is going to make back its budget many times over is what its legs are at the box office. And again, if you don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about legs at the box office, you take a movie's opening weekend, then you look at its final domestic gross and see how many times over it was able to duplicate that opening weekend. What's the multiple on its opening weekend? And the leggiest movie of 2025, again, this is domestically, probably shouldn't be a surprise to you, it is Sinners. Sinners' final domestic gross was 5.83 times its opening weekend. So it didn't just open well, it sustained incredibly well at the box office, and it was a great story to track. In second place, this actually kind of surprised me. It didn't make a whole lot at the box office, only about $15 million, but Eternity which was a really nice little movie from A24, made 5 times its opening weekend. One of Them Days, which was an early box office hit from back in January, made 4.24 times its opening weekend, so people kept going back to that movie or going to it for the first time over several weeks. The Housemaid currently is at number 4 at 4.19 times its opening weekend, and it's just the first of 2 other movies in a row that are Christmas movies, and you can see just how much that holiday window benefits films as far as opening weekend versus domestic gross. The SpongeBob movie Search for SquarePants has currently done 3.79 times its opening weekend. Song Sung Blue has done 3.78 times its opening weekend. Then we have The Bad Guys 2 and Jurassic World Rebirth. Zootopia 2 has currently done 3.66 times its opening weekend, and it had a big opening weekend. Paddington in Peru at 3.59 times its opening. Regretting You at 3.57 times. And then Avatar Fire and Ash. We usually see bigger legs from James Cameron, but still, it didn't have a small opening weekend, and it currently is at 3.54 times that opening weekend. And the fact that, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 of these movies are Christmas releases just goes to show you how atypical the box office is around the holidays compared to the rest of the year. So we've talked about some of the successes of 2025. Let's talk about some of the movies that did not turn out to be wise investments, the movies that returned worldwide the lowest on their reported budget. And the number one movie may surprise you because it was a really low profile release, but brought in very little compared to what was spent. And that is Kiss of the Spider Woman, which did almost no business. And it did get a wide release. These are among wide releases only, but it brought in basically only 6% of its production budget. So this movie just did not connect with people, and even though it was a modest budget, it was not able to return on that budget. After The Hunt from Luca Guadagnino had a big cast, Julia Roberts reportedly got her Julia Roberts salary for this movie. It brought in only 13% of its reported budget. Christie, starring Sydney Sweeney, brought in 14% of its budget. The Alto Knights, remember that? That was the movie that kind of got forgotten about before Warner Brothers went on its big box office run at the beginning of the year. Brought in 23% of its reported budget. The Smashing Machine at 41% of its budget. A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey from Kogonada bringing in just 45% of its reported budget. Hurry Up Tomorrow, the big movie from The Weeknd, bringing in just over half of its budget worldwide. Eddington with 53% of its budget. The Running Man bringing in just 62% of its budget from Edgar Wright. Caught Stealing from Darren Aronofsky, which I quite enjoyed, brought in just 71% of its budget. Then we have Snow White from Disney, which came in at 76% of its budget, and Tron Ares, also from Disney, at 79% of its budget. Of course, this doesn't tell the whole story because a lot of these movies were small budgeted films. They didn't have large budgets. So let's take a look at the lowest return on investment when we look at movies that had budgets of $100 million or more. And the biggest loser here, again, most people wouldn't guess, is The Running Man. It had a budget of around $110 million reportedly, and its worldwide box office gross was only 62% of that total. And keep in mind, this also does not include any money that was spent on marketing or advertising or any of that. Snow White, with its massive budget, brought in just 76%, so it was a big money loser. Tron Ares, also a very large budget with 79%. Elio from Pixar, with a budget up to $200 million, really was able to just match that number worldwide, so it lost a big amount of money. Mickey 17, with its $118 million budget, was only able to make just that and a little bit more at the worldwide box office. Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, it made back 1.47 times its budget, but that budget was reportedly in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Pound for pound, I think that The Final Reckoning may have lost the most as far as raw dollars at the box office in 2025. And One Battle After Another made back 1.48 times its budget, but its budget was over $100 million. This was Paul Thomas Anderson's most successful film at the box office of all time, or at least I should say his highest grossing. It looks like it's heading toward definitely a Best Picture nomination. Right now it is the heavy favorite to win Best Picture, but lost in all of that shuffle is the fact that it was not particularly successful at the box office and likely in the theatrical window was not a moneymaker for Warner Brothers. And on last week's show, I asked the members here on the channel what they thought the most surprising box office flop of 2025 was. This was either a movie that failed at the box office or significantly overperformed. And there are some familiar titles here. Mission Impossible with 30 votes, The Running Man with 27, Elio with 24. Then we have Fantastic Four with 20 votes. That falls more into the underperformance than box office flop side. It was in kind of that middle ground. Mickey 17 with 19 votes, Megan 2.0 with 15 votes, Thunderbolts came in at 13 votes, and the MCU just in general comes in at 11 votes. And it is true, there was no breakout MCU film, and there really was no MCU film that was a clear-cut moneymaker. All of them were in that middle ground, and I think you could probably consider all of them box office disappointments to some degree. The Smashing Machine came in with 10 votes, and Ballerina, the John Wick spinoff movie, came in with 10 votes. Surprising flops for the members here on the channel. And that's what I've got for you as far as the box office and the biggest hits and flops of 2025. Before we go, though, I wanted to talk about the world of streaming and actually have 2 weeks of Netflix numbers to start with. Because the show is later this week, there are 2 sets to talk about. So let's dive into them. This first set is from December 22nd through December 28th on Netflix. These are global numbers, and this was the week of Christmas. No surprise here, Stranger Things Season 5, which had its second batch of episodes drop this week, was at number 1 at 34.52 million views. And remember, that's across the runtime of the entire season. So it's likely that the new episodes alone generated watch time that was much higher than that. Netflix just did not share that specific information. The Great Flood is proving to be a surprisingly successful film on Netflix. This is a South Korean disaster film. It brought in 33 million views. The Grinch, which is the Illumination animated version of the movie, comes in third at 16.54 million views. Then we have Emily in Paris Season 5 at 13.28 million views. Wake Up Dead Man, which I think is safely can be said is going to be a substantial underperformance based on Glass Onion, is still in the top 5 at 11.8 million views. Dave Chappelle, The Unstoppable, and I'm going to stop there because I like having my channel, is at number 6 at 9.16 million views. K-Pop Demon Hunters, naturally, still in the top 10 at 9 million views, just over 9 million views. The Netflix movie A Time for Bravery comes in at number 8. Man vs. Baby is at number 9. And How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which is the Jim Carrey version of the film, I believe it is only on Netflix internationally, comes in at number 10 at 7.67 million views. And these were the numbers for the last week of 2025 stretching into 2026. So this is December 29th through January 4th. Stranger Things Season 5, which had its finale drop during this window, at number 1 again with 31.31 million views. Evil Influencer, which was a Netflix documentary, comes in at 15 million views. Then we have the Netflix original series Runaway at 12.69 million views. The Great Flood is at number 4. K-Pop Demon Hunters back into the top 5 at 9.42 million views. Wake Up Dead Man's at number 6. Stranger Things Season 1 back on the charts at number 7. So a lot of folks going back to the beginning after the ending of the series, the actual ending, not the fake 9th episode that apparently some people thought there was going to be. 7.64 million views on Stranger Things Season 1. Emily in Paris at number 8. Goodbye June, the Netflix movie, is at number 9 at 6.73 million views. And the Netflix limited series Cachero comes in at number 10 at 6.1 million views. And looking at the most watched shows for Netflix in 2025, now these are technically what you might call unofficial numbers, because I imagine this upcoming week we're going to get the Netflix What We Watched report, which will give all of the numbers for 2025. This chart is based on 6 months of complete numbers and then the ratings numbers that we have for the back half of the year. But Adolescence ends the year, according to these unofficial numbers, as the most watched show on Netflix at 151.89 million views. Then we have Squid Game Season 3 at 142.4 million and Squid Game Season 2 at 138.89 million. I imagine that there could be some substantial viewership data that we don't have for those 2 seasons yet. Wednesday Season 2 comes in 4th place. Stranger Things Season 5 currently is at number 5 at 105.7 million views for now the entire season. And we'll see how high up this chart it goes. It could get to number 1, but I think it's more likely to settle in below that spot. Untamed is at number 6. Ms. Rachel comes in at number 7. Zero Day comes in at number 8. Missing You comes in at number 9. And Sirens rounds out the top 10. Let's take a look now at the latest numbers from Nielsen. Now, there will likely be new numbers coming out later today, and they will also probably release their end of the year 2025 report in the next week or two. So I'll bring you those numbers when I have them. But these are the reported ratings numbers for December 1st through the 7th. These are domestic numbers only, and they're delayed by about a month because that's just how Nielsen works. So this is going into the Christmas season. How the Grinch Stole Christmas on Peacock was the most watched movie the first week of December at over 10 million hours watched. At number 2, we have Troll 2 on Netflix. This is not the cult classic terrible movie. This is the sequel to the international film. It brought in 8.35 million hours watched. My Secret Santa comes in third place. Home Alone on Disney Plus comes in at 7.85 million hours watched. At number 5 is the Amazon original Christmas film, Oh, What Fun, at 6.61 million hours watched. Then we have Rio basically tied at number 6. K-pop Demon Hunters in the top 10 at number 7 at 5.68 million hours watched. Then we have The Grinch on Peacock at number 8, Rio 2 at number 9, and Home Alone 2 rounding out the top 10. Home Alone, a very popular choice right around Christmas. These were the most watched streaming shows for that week, so this would be the week after Stranger Things dropped its first batch of episodes for season 5. It brought in 72.93 million hours watched. Sean Combs' The Reckoning, the 4-episode docuseries on Netflix, is in second at 37.9 million hours watched, but put in very impressive numbers when you look at it by episode, which we will in just a second. Landman comes in third place, followed by Homeland and NCIS. The Netflix show Victoria comes in at number 6 at 13.35 million hours watched. Then we have Bob's Burgers, Bluey, Grey's Anatomy, and Paw Patrol. And when we look at the top U.S. streaming debuts for a new series this year, Sean Combs' The Reckoning had the top debut for any original streaming show in 2025 as far as a new show, not a returning show, at 37.9 million hours. That knocks Untamed down to number 2, Zero Day to number 3, Monster, the Ed Gein story, to number 4, and Sirens to number 5. So Netflix with the 5 best debuts for a new series in 2025. And Stranger Things put up some really strong numbers in this second week after that new batch of episodes was released. Now, remember on Nielsen, they don't divide shows out by seasons. So this is watch time for all seasons. Stranger Things had already put up the most watch time for any series this year, the week of 11/24 to 11/30, which was that first batch of season 5 with 141 million watch hours. That had bumped Squid Game and its debut of Squid Game 2, or the week, I should say, after its debut, to number 2. But Stranger Things now has the third most watch hours for any series this year at 72.93 million hours watched for that first week in December, and it may very well take up 1 or 2 more spots on this chart. That bumps Wednesday down to numbers 4 and 5 from August and September. That was the debut week of the first batch of episodes of season 2 and the second batch of episodes of season 2. And as I mentioned, Sean Combs' The Reckoning did really impressive numbers as far as watch time per episode. So you take the total watch time, divide it by the number of episodes you can watch. It brought in 9.48 million hours of watch time per episode, easily number 1. Stranger Things bringing in 1.92 million hours per episode for all 38 episodes available at that time. Landman at 1.75 million hours per episode. The Abandons, which I believe has already been canceled by Netflix, at 1.49 million hours per episode. The Beast in Me and Love and Death also bringing in over 1 million hours of watch time per episode. Victoria, A Man on the Inside, Absentia, and Tulsa King round out the top 10. And when we look at the best watch time per episode numbers this year, Sean Combs' The Reckoning easily topping this chart with 9.48 million hours watched per episode. That is far above the previous number 1, which was Adolescence, the week after its debut at 6 million hours of watch time per episode. Then we have Untamed in its first 2 weeks of release, and Wednesday back in August rounding out the top 5. And that's what I've got for you here today on the show. Again, thank you to everybody who has sent their well wishes and love. And I have a great group of friends who have been very supportive, and family as well. As I mentioned, there will be a little bit more instability because I'll be back on the road this upcoming weekend and going into next week. So you'll see me with my road gear. But I do plan to cover the Golden Globes and all of the entertainment stuff that's happening, get back into the groove. And in less than 2 weeks, I will be heading to Park City for 2 weeks to cover the Sundance Film Festival. So that's going to be super exciting, and I'll be on the road for that. So it won't be a whole lot of studio time in January, but there will be a lot to talk about, and I appreciate everybody sticking around and listening to me talk about everything. Not the best start to 2026, but I think that there are some exciting possibilities for the year and some new things that I'm working on, and I appreciate you continuing to spend your time here with me. Until next time, please stay safe, and I'll see you then.